Now, I've just been on vacation for 2 weeks and expected when I came back that the Kansas legislature would still be in session, still wrestling over tax cuts in the budget. Well, they almost were. Governor Brownback only yesterday signing into law a gradual phasing out of income tax cuts in the Sunflower State, the signature accomplishment of an exhaustive legislative session. He signed the bill into law at a construction site in Overland Park.
We're on a path of growth and job creation. So I say, come to Kansas.
Why the construction site in Overland Park for this bill signing, Dave Helling?
Well, it's always nice to have pictures of big, shiny objects behind you when you sign big bills like that. Governor Brownback, Sam Brownback, and the Republicans in the legislature have argued for 2 years that the point of their tax reductions is not just about easing the burden on people, but it is to bring jobs, businesses, development to the state. Governor Brownback has really emphasized that this year. His argument is that by keeping the sales tax higher than it would have otherwise been, but continuing to phase out individual income taxes, you will create an Arthur Laffer-like growth in the state of Kansas, and I think the setting was meant to emphasize that fact.
And this very week, though, that these income tax phasing outs occur, though, Mary Sanchez, in your very own newspaper, we see some public safety cuts being introduced here in the state of Kansas. This week, the Department of Corrections looking at cutting 1 in 10 parole officers, trimming back prison guards, cutting funding for juvenile delinquent programs, yet they can afford to be cutting taxes?
Well, and you'll notice there was no little lovely shiny objects in the background for that sort of news. And that's the problem. I mean, anytime you have these issues, and it's budgeting, it's fiscal decisions, you know, there's going to be a loss somewhere else. It's robbing Peter to pay Paul, and just what does work out. You know, you cut parole officers, that has an impact on communities. It's a harder thing to track and see. You can see the big shiny new building, but that's what all has to be balanced out here.
Just so the terms of the debate can be clear for us, the bill the governor signed is a net tax increase over several years, largely because of the reinstatement of the sales tax. So the cuts that you're talking about, Nick and Mary, are basically the result of last year's action, which was such a significant tax cut that over the 2-year time frame, there is less money for government.
Now, also at this press conference this week where he's signing into law these income tax reductions, he's also taking a pot shot at the state of Missouri. And the governor, Kevin Collison, saying, well, you know, because we've heard about this whole cross-state border rivalry between Kansas and Missouri, Kevin Collison, and that, you know, what is, you know, Kansas luring all of these jobs from Missouri, but Governor Brownback this week saying, oh, he'd love to negotiate with Missouri.
Well, it's
love to do so, but no, it's not him at all. It's the governor of Missouri's fault here.
Right.
He's not willing to make changes.
Which is rather disingenuous. I mean, you know, there was a concerted effort by some significant civic leaders here about 2 years ago. They wrote a joint letter to both Governor Brownback and Governor Nixon saying, please, let's declare a moratorium on using these incentives. And Nixon at least said he'd be willing to entertain the idea. Brownback didn't even respond to their request. Now, apparently there has been a little bit of progress, but I have a hunch this shiny building that the governor was standing in front of is probably being built because it's being built for a company that was lured from Missouri to Kansas, sacrificing, again, state income taxes. That's one of the major tools, is these companies are being allowed to keep their employees' state income taxes, which A, takes money out of the pockets of Missouri, B, does not go into the Kansas Treasury for another 10 years, and vice versa when Missouri does it, and again has the effect of forcing other taxes to be increased, which example, the sales tax going up in Kansas. You know, it's a robbing Peter to pay Paul type of game, and the big thing is, it doesn't do any good for the overall metropolitan area. It really doesn't bring new jobs. It doesn't have, people don't build new homes. You know, it's just a wash, to be honest with you.
Bill.
I'm not sure that anybody was really surprised when the governor said he was willing to negotiate, because he's made a concerted effort to distance himself from the actual luring of jobs. His contention all along has been, these are blind offers. I don't even know about them. I just, you know, they come in without my involvement, and a lot of people have questioned as to how deeply he is involved.
That's nonsense. And the governor's been quoted as saying he's using this area as an experiment for his tax policies in Kansas. I mean, you know, they look at Johnson County, they meaning Topeka, as being a major economic engine for the entire state of Kansas. I mean,
Which
the
is true,
statistics are,
actually.
yeah, there's far more money generated by the businesses and the people living in Johnson County going to Topeka in proportion to their population for the overall state. They look at Johnson County as being, you know, an extremely fruitful area for them to try to generate more revenues for the state of Kansas. And as far as what that means to the overall Kansas City metropolitan area, that really hasn't entered into the equation yet down there.
Well, listen.